There's been some discussion lately about budget deficits, of which, of course, budget caps are related. And some of my colleagues have suggested that budget deficits don't matter as long as people will loan us money. Do you agree with that?
I think it's risky to continue to run large deficits that add to a debt that could, at some point, put the United States government in the position of not being able to respond quickly to emergencies or problems, because so much of the money that the federal government spends goes to interest and paying for that debt. So I think it's risky. I don't know that I would ascribe to the idea that deficits don't matter. I think CBO believes we are on an unsustainable path in terms of the continued increase in the debt, and that has mostly to do with the ability of the federal government to respond when it needs to.
Yes, sir.
This is not my area at all, so I defer to the experts.
So you don't have an opinion one way or the other about whether deficits matter?
Well, I guess I run the National Security Division at CBO, so we focus more on defense issues. And I could just restate what Terry says, that the institution has a position that current projected debt levels will be unsustainable long term.
Mm-hmm. Well, the budget caps are of course, symptomatic of a larger problem that we talk a lot about, spending, and how we need to live within our means and do better. But I've only been here 2 years, but my experience is that everybody's for fiscal restraint and fiscal responsibility. But when you get around to doing something, it's kind of like everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody's ready to make the trip. You don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but now's your chance. If you were king or queen for a day and wanted to have the most immediate impact on our budget deficits as well as our longer-term debt, what would you do? Forget the politics.
Well, first thing I would do if I was queen for a day is have Bryce Harper sign with the Nationals again. So,
fair enough.
But in terms of the debt and deficit, I think the largest and growing problem that we face is with mandatory spending. Yeah. Mandatory, and so I think that part of the solution to addressing the deficit problems, I think, has got to come from taking a look at mandatory programs. They are the largest and the fastest growing part of the budget.
Yeah, I think tell me if I have this wrong. I read an analysis that you did. CBO is predicting that over the next 10 years, discretionary spending is going to increase about 3% a year. Mandatory spending with interest about 9%. Does that sound right?
Yeah, that sounds like in the basic ballpark. Yep.
Okay, so it'll double basically in over the next 10 years. I'm working my way through. I think CBO did the analysis of ways to save money. Mm-hmm. Isn't that the chairman gave me a copy?
Yep. It's budget options. Yep.
Very interesting. And the 21 second, do you have an opinion on that?
It's a great volume. Thank you.
I'm sorry?
It's a great book. We all work on it very hard at our agency.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Can you give me, in my last 10 seconds, a suggestion on, in terms of discretionary spending, the most flagrant abuses, the obvious waste?
So I don't think many people would disagree that there is waste and improper payments and fraud. I think most IGs, or many IGs, have pointed that out at agencies. GAO has pointed that out. Our analysis in looking at legislation to deal with things like improper payments indicates that those types of things are not a very large portion of most budgets, and that while you might be able to get to a point of having fewer improper payments, for example, that could come at a very steep price. And in many cases, things like improper payments have to do with the paperwork wasn't filled out correctly, somebody didn't sign something. So even if you solve those problems, it is not clear that you're going to reduce the deficit or save very much money.
May I, Mr. Chairman? Improper payments about 144 billion a year.
Well, I think that
So
is.
if you cut that in half, I take your point, it's a very good one about filling out paper wrong. But sending checks to dead people, pretty blatant. And even scarier is they're being cashed.
Absolutely, and I don't mean to suggest that those sorts of things should not be addressed, or that dealing with some of those things would result in fewer outlays.
Are the IRS signing hundreds of millions of dollars of consulting contracts with people who owe taxes? Not just allegedly, but there's a final judgment against them.
That one I don't know much about, but
I've gone way
Okay.
over, I'm sorry.
That's good.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.